2414 is a podcast about finding hope and common ground through casual conversation. Like the friends on the road in the New Testament, in Luke chapter 24, verse 14, we want to walk away with more understanding that leads to more conversation as the journey continues. Thanks for walking with us.
Oh no. Everything all at once. Welcome to 2414. My name is Shane Welter. I'm joined by Pastor Dan.
Hey, Shane.
Hey, we're continuing our series, Can We Trust the Bible? Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying tuned. If this is your first episode in the series, we're talking about the Bible and talking about how it kind of came to be, sources for different pieces of it, different parts and kind of whatnot. I'm probably butchering the description of this, but we're talking about the Bible and the validity of it, and it's in conjunction with our 9:30 hour series on Sunday mornings, located in the Great Room, Federal Way, Washington. Whew, that's a mouthful. But we start every episode here with highs, lows.
Yeah.
Instead of question of the day, we're going to continue this incredible game called Outburst.
It's our new favorite.
Best game ever. In it, only the 1980s version of it. You can't get a modern one.
They might sell a modern one, but we don't endorse that one.
No, I'm sure they do, though. I'm sure it's great and maybe even better, but this is all we got.
You should buy one, keep it in plastic wrap for your grandkids. And like that, like the hope chest, people used to have like a hope chest where they collect stuff for their marriage. So you should get like some like 80s, 90s, 2000s trivia. Keep it in the plastic.
It will be comparable fun.
Oh my goodness.
I'm sure. Oh no. All right, but we're gonna do some brief highs and lows because people and relationships are important. So you should ask some of your family or friends these highs and lows yourself. But we'll start with ourselves. I'll throw it to you, Dan.
By the way, you just said that in passing. I want to pause there. I think that's so true. Like, really.
Yeah.
We say highs and lows here. People say happy, crappy, or peaks and pits. I'll often, on a Sunday morning or Wednesday evening or bumping into somebody, I'll say something like, hey, anything to like celebrate this week or anything difficult going on?
Yeah.
Just, it matters so much because almost everyone has something that's worth celebrating and something that's burdensome. And both of those can be difficult to share uninvited.
Yeah, I was going to say, and also people are terribly awkward, unsocial creatures who need to be social.
Yeah, we're made for it.
So this is your pass. This is a free gimme. Just say highs and lows. It's so easy.
And it's a really significant way to love someone.
Yeah.
To invite them to share something to celebrate or a burden. So a high in my life, our refrigerator's fixed.
Oh, really?
So that's exciting.
So can we get ours back?
Oh, that's right. If you're just listening for the first or second time, I commandeered the 2414 refrigerator from personal use.
Robbed it from us.
I stole it and left the room disheveled with like overturned chairs. Shane thought we got robbed. It was just me.
At least 3 water bottles in there.
Yes, so I will bring back the refrigerator.
Good.
So that's my high. My low is I'm very close to finishing a book. I mentioned I'm reading the Golden Compass series. And
you almost finished that.
So it's always weird for me when I finish a book because I've lived with these characters for so long, and I
left with this void.
It just ends. So I usually will read some like very short story, like a palate cleanser. I can't jump into a new series because I'm like, you're not my dad. Like some stepdad tries to replace your dad. Like, you're not the characters I know and love. I don't even know you.
Yeah.
And it's like starting new friends. It's a really weird thing for me. So in the book Every Moment Holy, this book of liturgies and prayers, they actually have a liturgy or a prayer for like when you finish reading a book, just to like take a breath and kind of process these characters have brought you joys and challenges and sadness, and you're saying goodbye.
That's beautiful.
So that's a weird low for me when I finish a book.
I just remembered I did the highs and lows wrong. We were going to do highs and lows differently.
So Shane, I'll ask you, what are your upcoming highs and lows?
Yeah, so I was gonna ask,
Looking
what
into
are
the
your
future.
preemptive highs and lows in the future?
Well, that one is because I haven't finished the book yet.
Okay, that's true. So your high or lows?
My high is that we in the past we fixed our refrigerator.
Okay, yeah, but your low is that you're gonna finish.
I'm gonna be sad in the
Okay.
next few days when I finish my book.
Okay, there it is. All right. So
Shane, looking into the days ahead, what are you anticipating being a high and a low?
So what will have been a high is a high when this comes out. It was a great time spent with my family in South Dakota. What if you're listening to this, I guess, in South Dakota, maybe.
Ooh.
So this coming week, or today, I leave for South
Like
Dakota.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yeah,
like a Back to the Future moment.
It's really just meta and just hurting my brain to like
trash cans.
talk in this way. So yeah, it was great spending time with my family. Oh, it was, and the low is that it's done so soon. Oh, it's so weird. I can't.
All right, moving on.
Moving on.
All right.
Other low I was gonna say is like was the fights we had because we're too competitive, and so we got in some arguments.
Okay.
I'm guessing
Not everybody made it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Somebody got mad playing Yahtzee or something.
Yeah, the broken ashtray on the wall.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
All right, we're going to do one round of Outburst, the game of verbal explosion.
Yes. Just think Family Feud.
Okay, I've got one in each hand, my left or my right. You can pick, Shane.
All right. I did it right, and I'm going to say the back side of it.
The backs.
Okay. Yes.
I actually picked these two categories to make it
And I'm
something
here just,
reasonable.
And I'm here just ruining everything.
All right. So we'll save these other categories for later. Let me tell you what you passed on.
Oh no. That's so
one
sad.
was kinds of cheese.
That's good. That's
and
a good one.
The other one was camping hazards.
Camping hazards.
I was really hoping for that
That's
one.
infinite. That's infinite.
Only 10 though.
That plane hit you. I don't.
Okay, so for those of you playing along at home, I'm about to flip our sand timer, which we think is 30 seconds. We've never timed it.
Give or take.
So it's a tabletop game timer that came with it. Not very scientific. And then the verbal explosions will commence as we outburst based on the category. Sort of like Family Feud, but we don't know what the statistics are. And our goal is to come up with the top 10 or the only 10 results listed based on the category.
But we can say as many as we want.
We can say, we think. We haven't read the rules.
We made this.
We found these cards and said, we're going with it.
Yep.
And if you didn't hear our episode on Outburst because you're trying to hear about the Bible, these cards are printed on that old red decoder paper, and then you slide them into this red decoder box receptacle, and then if you squint, you can kind of make out the words.
It's beautiful.
So we passed.
I'm all right. Yeah.
We passed on kinds of cheese. I think
Okay.
we would have gotten 7 there.
I think we would have gotten like 4.
Okay,
but
we passed on camping hazards.
I think we would have got 1.
Oh, we would have got at least 3 or 4.
infinite.
Bears, ants.
Ants? Death by ants?
It doesn't say
Jumanji? What is
it doesn't
this?
say fatal camping hazards. Just like rain, that's a hazard.
Okay.
Okay, and so we passed on both of those.
All right.
I don't think we're gonna get 4. I don't think we're gonna get 3.
I'm ready for it. I love the ones we're
All right.
going to suck at.
Here we go.
Okay.
Play along at home. I'm gonna read the category and flip the timer. The category is people who survived assassination attempts. Ronald Reagan.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Jesus. I don't know.
Sure. Oh, man. Hitler.
Okay.
It's true. Huh?
Like some people they maybe survived some. Like John
do
Lennon
it.
got
Sure.
killed, and so did MLK Jr.
Yeah.
I think they probably had previous.
I'm sure they
attempts.
had Malcolm X, maybe? I don't know.
Sure. Lincoln probably had failed attempts before the
Why
successful
not?
one.
We'll write it.
People who survived assassination attempts.
Oh, man. Nixon? I don't know.
Nixon?
Why not?
Henry VIII.
FDR. Yeah. Henry VIII.
FDR. And
Victoria.
time. Queen Victoria.
Yep, that was my last one.
Okay.
This is... Oh!
All right.
It's too late now. I would say Stalin.
Okay, well, we'll see. Our listeners right now are going, you idiot, you forgot about this person. Or nobody tried to kill Queen Victoria.
I'm not saying that they did.
People from history. Most people from history who were famous probably had attempts on their life.
Yeah.
That seems
if you
safe.
know their name. Yeah.
Okay, this is going to be poor. How many did we guess? How many do you think now we get of the 10 did we get? I was guessing 3 going into it.
I have 3 as well.
Okay.
That's, yeah.
Number 1, George Wallace.
Like William Wallace?
It says George.
George Wallace.
My first thought was William Wallace.
Okay, I'm not dumb then.
I don't know who George. Comment below if you know who George Wallace is.
Please tell us.
Number 2, Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
We got 1. Gerald Ford. He was the president. Somebody tried to kill him.
Yeah.
Okay. Franklin Roosevelt. You said FDR.
I did say FDR.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Andy Warhol.
I thought he was assassinated.
Well,
I guess we.
He maybe survived for a while. Pope John Paul II.
My favorite Pope.
Did he have the Pope Mobile? Is he the one who built like the bulletproof glass? JP2.
Sure.
Okay.
Maybe he's the reason for it.
King Hussein. I'm not sure if that's Saddam Hussein or part of some other Hussein.
Different like Middle Eastern lineage. Okay.
Adolf Hitler. You said Hitler?
I did.
So that's 3.
All right.
Anastasia. I think is a Russian.
She was never found. She's the lost, you can't say she survived if you never found her.
You can take that up with 1987, Shane.
All right. All right.
As of 1987, she was presumed living.
Isn't it all right, fair, all right, sure. Okay.
And Vito Corleone.
It's my favorite musketeer.
Is it Corleone? Corleone?
I don't know who that is.
It's like a mobster, like a gangster.
Oh, okay. I had no clue.
So to recap,
that was it.
That's 10. George Wallace.
Oh.
Ronald Reagan. We got that one. Gerald Ford. Nope. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Got that one. Andy Warhol.
Ooh.
Nope. Pope John Paul II. JP2. Did not get that one. King Hussein. I love that he gets the title. Adolf Hitler. Anastasia. Just the one and only.
Yep.
And Vito Corleone. So we got 3 out of 10. That's as poor as I was expecting.
That's we said. We were right.
We did it.
Yeah. That's what we guessed.
We did it.
So in lieu of Pope JP2 or whatever, that's close enough to the Bible. We're talking about the Bible today.
Such transitions.
This is the 6th week of the
5, yeah.
Yeah, 5th week of the series, Can We Trust the Bible? Maybe our 6th episode. I've lost track at this point. But what's the hot topic today?
The hot topic today, our hot takes.
How is it different from last week's the New Testament referencing the Old Testament?
Yeah. So big picture here, we're looking at, can we trust the Bible? Many people around the world throughout history have looked at the 66 books of the Bible as the Word of God, and historically accurate as well as theologically or spiritually true. And so we're just sort of looking at that assumption. What can we know about the origins of this book? People have questions today, concerns, objections of we can't trust it because, or we know it's not true because, or it's not reliable because. So we're kind of looking at some of those things. This week we're looking at the. So a lot of this is borrowed from Lee Strobel, wrote a book called The Case for Christ, where he talks about the different tests or questions we might ask about the writers themselves.
Okay. So like the authenticity of the person?
Yeah. So based on what we have in the Gospels, what can we discern about the authors, and maybe not just a generic what can we discern, but based on what we have in the 4 Gospels, are there reasons we can trust the authors, or are there reasons we should mistrust them?
Okay. So have they shown in other documents or sources, this person was crazy, or this person lies a lot, or am I on the right track?
So not necessarily within other sources, though. So kind of within this single source, and maybe as it relates, not just maybe, and as it relates to, say, we'll look at the 4 Gospels.
Okay.
So within Matthew, within Mark, within Luke, within John, are there reasons to even consider that this is a reliable historical document?
Okay.
Or are there internal reasons to say, obviously we can't think that? And then between those 4 writings, are there reasons to think these actually support one another? Or are there reasons to think these are contradictory and beyond repair? Like, it's so, we get such different views, we can't know anything.
Yeah. This book said that Jesus was 6'2". This one says he's 7 foot flat.
Right, yeah. So are there errors and contradictions that sort of disqualify them?
The Bible doesn't actually say that, by the way. Just using that as an example.
That would have been a very tall first century Jew.
Jesus
be a very tall person in the NBA.
You know how big the cross was.
No. This is blasphemous. We've never edited an episode. This might be the one, Shane. No, I'm just kidding. So Lee Strobel highlights various tests. He calls them. That sounds a little too pointed for me. More like questions we might ask about the authors.
Okay.
So maybe before I dig into those, Shane, what do you think some of the questions people have or objections people have, whether it's from a Christian who's wondering or a non-Christian who's wondering, or somebody who's like, antagonistic against the Christian faith? We can't trust Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John because...
Yeah, I'd imagine that disciples or authors wanted self-gain. They want to be part of this cool emerging religion. Yeah, Christianity maybe.
So self-interest, and they're going to profit from it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, profit, definitely a big one. That's the common saying nowadays. If you want to get rich, start a religion.
Okay,
that's what I've heard.
No, yeah,
so,
there's something to that.
I don't know. That might have been the same. There could have been similar ideas and back then. I imagine some other authenticity checks or credibility checks. I had one. Might have been. I'm blanking now.
Okay. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I was just.
No. This is important. No. I was gonna. Well. I guess I was saying credibility, if things don't line up at all with what they're writing.
Okay.
So
like accuracy, is that?
Yeah. Accuracy.
Can we believe the facts?
Yeah. There's the, said like the lunacy part. They were just crazy. They were just writing stuff down. They had nothing to do with anything. They could have just been writing this randomly. I think. I remember what I was thinking. There could just be a whole timeline issue. Like, I don't know. They could have been writing this at a way different time.
Yeah.
And so they don't actually know what they're talking about. They're just wrong. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
That's good.
Any other ones that?
No, those are some good ones. I think we're going to touch on. I think all of those. We will touch is very quick. We'll be very quick here.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to spend hours going into it. But
so let me give you a rundown of the tests that Lee Strobel highlights, and maybe just a couple. I'll go through the whole list and then give a kind of a call out for what each one maybe speaks to.
Yeah,
and then that'll probably be what we get done. So intention test.
So why they wrote?
Yes. Should we do them one at a time? So intention. Let me read them.
Okay, read them all.
Intention, ability, character, consistency, bias, cover-up, corroboration, and adverse witness. So the intention test, the ability test, character test, consistency test, bias test, cover-up test, corroboration test, and adverse witness test. So intention test, this asks the question, were they even trying to write history?
Okay. So in previous episodes, we've talked about something happened in your life that was so important. Your emotions were so on fire in maybe a good way or sad way, a happy way. You just had to write this down. Like, so in that kind of light.
Yeah. Or so, my youngest, their classroom had a young authors thing at the end of the school year. And he wrote a story about aliens and power crystals, and everybody explodes. Spoiler alert, everybody dies at the end.
Just going to read that one.
So it's a delightful little tale from a second grader. He was writing fiction. He knew he was writing fiction. It's obvious that it's fiction. Which is different than if he wrote a story of, last summer, my family and I went on a vacation to Oregon. And while we were at the beach, this happened.
Yeah.
So is it purporting to be factual? Because there's plenty of myth that knows it's myth. Now, there might be things that we would call myth that are purporting to be factual. But if it doesn't even think it's factual or historical, then we don't necessarily need to consider it that way either. So intention is, were these guys intending to record truth for us?
Okay. So literally just what was their intention?
Yeah. Can we discern their intention?
Okay.
And not every book has a thesis statement, but the Gospel of Luke does. So the first few verses of Luke, he begins by saying, a lot of people have been writing about Jesus, and so that you would have certainty about the things that you've been taught about him, I investigated these things and put together an orderly account so that you could know the certainty of the things that you believed. And so Luke begins by saying, the stuff we've been hearing and talking about and believing that a lot of people have been writing about, I wanted to do my own homework and put together kind of an organized summary of the life of this Jesus guy, and here it is.
Okay. And so I guess the intent varies from book to book, or is what we know of it. Like Luke, you can tell his intentions are very clear.
Yep.
Like Gospel of Mark, I don't know.
Yeah,
like it's a little less clear.
Right. It's not as explicit. The Gospel of John, I think, is equally explicit in a slightly nuanced way. But in John chapter 20, near the end, John says that, if I wrote down everything Jesus did, we wouldn't be able to do it all.
Yeah.
But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ.
Yeah.
So John's like, I'm writing so that you would believe in this Jesus, in what he actually did. So Luke and John tell us that they are trying to record accurately what happened. And Matthew and Mark don't have that same explicit verse, but they tell the same story of Jesus. So two of them are telling us they're recording history, and the other two match. And so from what we can tell, it seems like they are trying to accurately record history. Also, in our last episode, we mentioned at the end of St. Paul's letters, he's got those odds and ends. Say hi to this guy, Alexander the coppersmith. What a jerk. That he includes such minutia that's so...
Minutia?
Like small details. Minute.
Word of the day.
Minutia is the day. That's got one of the... Anyway. Shane.
I know what minute means. I've never heard minutia.
Yeah. All right. Word of the day. Comment below. But he includes such specific, obscure historical details that are just part of like, I left my coat there. Can you bring my coat? Like, why? What on earth? Why would you ever include that?
Yeah.
If you were making up a religion or telling a mythic tale,
there's no gain unless you were 20 layers deep into your like scheme, and you're like, well, if I write this, then
And in a similar way, the New Testament has really difficult sayings, difficult truths, weird episodes. Like there's one weird episode where Jesus curses a fig tree. So they're on the road and there's a fig tree and he's like, I wonder if there's figs. And there's no figs. And he's like, cursed be this fig tree. May you never, make figs again. And so then the narrator's like, by the way, guys, it wasn't even the season for figs.
Like what?
And so,
what are we supposed to get from this?
So if you were just writing a fable of moral stories, what do you do with that one? Mm-hmm. But if Jesus was hungry one day and he was hoping there was a fig and there wasn't, and he cursed it, even though it wasn't the season for figs, if that's what happened and you're trying to write down what happened, then you might include that. So there's no reason to include that other than that's just what happened that one day. Also, Jesus has like really hard sayings that, gosh, if you were starting a club, even if there was this historical guy Jesus and he said that, I'm cutting that out. That's not going to help.
That's not helping people like join like what we're believing.
Yeah, if they're making up something, there's no reason to keep a whole big percentage of the New Testament.
Yeah, and I guess I think you kind of touched on this. Excluding the Gospels, I imagine a lot of Paul's letters, I feel like have a lot of intent behind them. It's like, I write to you because you guys are messing up, or...
Yeah, so Paul's letters read exactly like every other first century actual letter and like correspondence.
It lines up with how people wrote.
They wrote. Yeah. So even if he doesn't say the genre I'm writing, or the intention of I'm writing this for this reason, it's the appropriate genre of what you would expect someone who's writing something that's true. Mm-hmm. Now, again, he could be making stuff up. I'm not saying this proves gotcha. Now you got to accept Paul's letters. But if we're considering this book, the New Testament or the Bible, it's a fair question to say, were these people even trying to write history, or did somebody in the church impose that on them later? This was never supposed to be believed. Mm-hmm. Or was this intended to be factual account of what happened all along? The fact that Paul chooses to use the normal genre of writing letters, of conveying information, as opposed to some mythic quest, that's part of the overall picture.
Okay. All right.
So that's intention.
That's intent.
Second one is ability. Did these authors have the ability to accurately record what happened?
Like, did they have thumbs?
Yes, did they have opposable thumbs? So really, this ability is focusing more on memory here. So Jesus lived roughly 0 to 33 CE, Common Era, or AD, Anno Domini. So he lived 0 to 33. It seems as though the New Testament documents weren't written until... I guess it's sort of an open-ended question of when did these things get written? So the earliest manuscript we have of a New Testament writing is from about 130 CE.
That's the oldest.
That's the oldest like piece of paper that we have with New Testament on it.
And is it specifically New Testament, or is it?
So it's the Gospel of John. It's a fragment. It's like the size. It's like the size of I don't know what that would be. Like probably about the size of an iPhone.
Okay, so a little
smaller. Yeah,
but the words, the text is lined up.
Yeah, and it's kind of triangular, and it's written on front and back, and it's from the Gospel of John. Okay. So we have a fragment. Now it's not like the original, and I think it was found down in Egypt, perhaps. It's. John Ryland's manuscript. It's over in England today, but it was written about 130 based on different dating techniques. And so traditionally, most scholarship thinks that John wrote his gospel around 90 or so AD. So we have one manuscript from 40 years later.
Do they have like I'm guessing there's logic to why they guessed he didn't write it the day after Jesus ascended.
Right. Well, so this is part of the question is, if Jesus died and rose 33, the year 33, why do we not have manuscripts for many years? And I don't think the gospel writers wrote their gospel right away.
I think you've touched on before, like early church, like they weren't concerned about writings. They went out, like they verbally, I mean, the story of Pentecost, I guess, like,
hey, did you hear?
Yeah. Like we need to tell people, like They're not saying, hold on, let me scribe this down, which was a long process.
Yeah, they got busy telling the good news. So Paul's traveling, he's planting churches. And then after he stayed in the community for days, weeks, months, sometimes years, there was a group of people there, and they are baptizing and preaching and receiving the Lord's Supper and praying. They are the Christian church in that place. And then later, Paul's traveling, and some messenger brings word that there's a problem. So there's a gap between how long he was there, how long it took the messenger to get there, how long it took him to think about what his response might be, to schedule an appointment with the scribe, to send by carrier the message there. And so that whole time they didn't have Galatians until Galatians showed up.
Yeah.
So there's this inherent gap between the work of Jesus and when documents are written. But the question here is the gap, how problematic is that gap? So, things get distorted and expanded over time, and memories fade, and people misremember. And so is the gap so great that we can't trust what they wrote, or did they have the ability to accurately record the life and sayings of Jesus years later?
Okay, so that's ability, but is there kind of more specific?
Yeah. So what do we know? What can I say about any of that stuff?
Yeah.
So maybe some is just to talk about the timing a little bit. So St. Paul most likely died in the mid-60s. We don't have a specific date. The Bible doesn't tell us.
1960.
Yep, 60 AD or 60. So the most common date that's given is 64 AD. That's when Rome was on fire and Nero was blaming the Christians.
Okay.
So again, this is not a checkmate gotcha moment, just trying to put the pieces together. But if, and it seems likely that Paul died in the mid to late 60s. Okay. So working backwards from there, the book of Acts is in many ways kind of a biography of Paul. Like the second half, it's a lot of his journeys. And the book of Acts ends with St. Paul alive and well. And it doesn't seem like a cliffhanger. Like if St. Paul had died, that would have been an important piece of information
to include.
Yeah, there's no reason to leave that out.
Yeah.
And so it seems very likely that Acts was written before Paul died. And the book of Luke was written before Acts. So Acts begins by saying, in my previous book, O Theophilus. So Paul dies in 64. Acts was written before that. Luke was written before that. And most people think that the Gospel of Mark was probably the first gospel for a number of reasons. So that would have been written even before that. So we're moving back from 64 AD, some years. It's uncertain exactly how many, but there's I think probably a good 30-year gap between the events of Jesus' life and when the gospel writers are writing.
Okay.
So the question is 30 years, how big of a problem is 30 years?
To your memory, but significant, yeah. Which I imagine is a long time because I can't fathom.
You can Shane barely remembers 30 years ago. This is interesting. So also you grew up in a world with the smartphone. And so your view of memory and your function of memory is very different than mine and is very different than people even a generation ago.
Yeah. I imagine people's ability to retain memory was a lot better the more back you go. In that my generation, we rely on it. Like, oh, what was this thing that happened a while ago? Well, let me go back on my camera and you can check that out.
So even going back to Socrates, he was worried about writing because if we write things down, we won't know them anymore. So we use writing as like a source of knowledge. I've got all these books. The challenge is, how many books have I read, And how many of the things, even if I've read them, do I actually have any kind of working knowledge with? Yeah. And so we've outsourced our memory to our media.
Yeah.
And so some of our listeners who are my age or older can resonate with this, but younger people can hardly recognize this. So Shane, let me ask you, how many phone numbers do you have memorized?
Ooh, probably not including 911, probably about 4.
So you have yours,
mine, my wife's, my mom's and dad's.
Your mom's and dad's.
Which I would say is probably more than most people my age.
Yeah. So, and you're a smart young man. You have a bachelor's degree. Like, you are an educated person.
I went to college. Yeah.
But you don't have more than half dozen people's phone numbers memorized. I don't even know the church's phone number. I have to look it up when I'm filling out a form.
I sadly do too. Yeah.
I have a business card. I have my own business card at my computer. Yeah. So when I'm filling out the address, I don't know the zip code here.
What? Oh, come on.
I know my own. Mine's different. Is yours different?
Yeah, but barely. I know because it's subtly different.
You're better than me.
I went to college.
But here's the thing. I remember my phone number growing up. I remember my friends' phone numbers growing up. Yeah. So when I was growing up, you just knew all your friends' phone numbers.
You had to.
Yeah.
There wasn't a choice. You had to remember these things.
And this sounds crazy, but if you would meet a friend on the playground or make a new friend and you wanted to call them later, what's your phone number so I can call you later? 314-537-0235. Mm-hmm. And you just knew your friends' phone numbers.
Yeah, and you had ways to remember these things so that you'd set yourself up for success. So different dependencies, changes our memory. But I guess relating that all back to people's ability, people's memory and ability to remember things fairly well.
It was a normal part of life.
Yeah.
And so even in a way that even 20 years ago in America, people remembered differently. Mm-hmm. And it's not gotten better. When I say differently, they remembered better. It has gotten far worse. Now we know different things.
Yeah.
So one hand, they were just used to memorizing more. Also, their religious, it was an oral culture. You hear that phrase a lot, but there were rabbis who had the Old Testament memorized. In the same way today, actually, a lot of Muslims are very proud of the fact, proud in a good way, that many Muslims have memorized the Quran in the original language, the whole Quran, and they have it memorized. That's still happening today because they take their religious text so seriously.
And that even happens in Judaism, correct?
Yeah. There are some Christians who memorize scripture, but in general, we're not known for it.
Yeah, well, pieces of it, but in Judaism, it's I don't know. Isn't that a rite of passage that you memorize?
You recite scripture, yeah.
Yeah, the first 5 books.
That's not like a requirement for a bar mitzvah. You don't have to memorize the Torah. That's a pretty big burden.
Okay.
So they on the one hand they had more practice and were used to memorizing it. It was part of an oral culture where that happened normal. Mm-hmm. I think the one thing that gets thrown out very often is but what about the game telephone where a message gets distorted as it gets passed on?
Yeah, so I've heard that.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair question, but I think there are very important differences. So in the game of telephone, the goal is to have fun by misrepresenting the message.
Yes. And also, you might get this. Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm imagining too, you're telling other people through the game of telephone, which in certain books of the Bible, yes, that is part of it, where they heard the story and they're relaying that script. But some of them are firsthand. So the point of telephone, you're telling it to other people. And some of these books, they're not telling. This is their own telephone with themselves, I guess.
Yeah, so you're saying with telephone, you're sitting in a circle, somebody whispers something. By the time you get to the 5th person, it's 5th-hand knowledge.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, in as opposed to in real life history, many of the people who are sharing this, they had firsthand knowledge.
Yeah. The only person they're sharing with it is you now when they're writing it.
Yep. So I think another point of comparison is so at telephone, the goal is to be silly. Yeah. The goal is not to, because if the goal was, hey, I wonder, can we accurately preserve this message and get all the way around in a room? Well, you could.
Yeah.
Here's what you do. Instead of whispering it and only being able to say it one time, the first person would say it in a really clear, loud voice, and the second person would say it, and they'd look back at the first person and go, did I get that right? And they would say yes, or if no, it's this. And then the third person would go, all right, let me see if I got that. And then the first two people would go, yep, that's exactly what we said. And it wouldn't be fun at all. It'd be a stupid game.
The most boring.
Like, it's because the point is, telephone is supposed to be a silly game. But if you actually cared about relaying the message faithfully, it wouldn't be fun. However, you would absolutely be able to get 40 people down the room. Can all 40 of us say the same thing? Yeah, it's not that hard.
Yeah. Okay, so fun. All right.
Go ahead.
No. I was just saying we spent a lot of time on ability tests. There's
I'm sorry. Yeah,
a few other ones I want to touch base on. So character test. I'm assuming that's a person's character.
Yeah, yeah.
Their trustworthiness.
Are they trustworthy?
Okay.
And so it's a fair question to ask. Are these New Testament writers, do they seem like trustworthy people? Or is there any reason to doubt their trustworthiness? So it's easy to be skeptical and say, they probably have motives. Well, is there any reason you'd say that? Well, no. So,
or maybe.
But what we see in the New Testament is that these authors are calling people to a high ethical standard. Like a lot of the New Testament is like, be a good, loving, sacrificial person, do the right thing, always, no matter the cost. So like, that's a pretty far leap from, I bet they're kind of screwing with everybody.
Yeah.
Like that undercuts everything they're trying to do.
Yeah.
They suffered for their message. It cost them a lot. And even though at different times in world history, the Christian church has been very wealthy and abusive of power at times, it was hundreds of years before there was anything to gain. So they had a message about integrity that they were sharing, even though it cost them everything.
And it was only after it became popular.
Yeah. So there doesn't seem to be anything in their perceivable character that would disqualify
There's nothing
them.
to gain from this.
Right.
Okay.
The consistency test is looking at these four gospels. They have differences. They've got discrepancies. And the question is, do those differences disqualify these things from being reliable? Are they neutral, or do they even maybe support the trustworthiness of these documents?
I guess for instance, like Matthew, Mark, and Luke using parables, and then John using idiom. Is that the right word? Not idioms.
Yeah.
Similes.
Yeah.
I am, or what's the word? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Simile?
Yeah,
I am.
Uses similes, metaphors.
Yeah, the I ams versus the parables.
And I would even say you can go closer and say Matthew and Mark might tell the same parable, but they use different words.
Yeah.
So does that mean we don't know what Jesus was saying, or do those differences discredit the documents or not? And again, this isn't a chess game. We're not winning a debate, and so I guess my short answer is I don't think they discredit it. I think there are a number of ways to describe why that's not a big problem. So here's an example. If I was telling you something that happened yesterday, if I was telling it to my 9-year-old son, if I was preaching it in a sermon, or if I was writing an academic paper for peer review about the events of yesterday, depending on the different audiences, I would say it very differently.
Yeah, I think we would even say, if I had to write the best I could your sermon this last Sunday, and the point that you said, I would say it this specific way, and I think the gist would be there. Let alone ask a different member who heard the same sermon, write it down. I think the point that you preached would still be there, but what we wrote would be completely different.
Yeah, and so to add another layer to that, so you talked about 4 authors, but you have to consider I would suggest considering that they're also writing to audiences. So if Shane is writing to his pastor brother about the sermon versus, maybe we had a visitor who doesn't even believe in Jesus who's writing to her Hindu relatives back in India about what she heard, and somebody else is writing to their child. They're different authors with different audiences. Are those going to sound the same? No, but could they all be accurately recounting something that's true? I think so. We do this with language all the time too. I think about politics. So the White House announced yesterday, or the president said, or the press secretary shared, or whitehouse.gov posted, or the news out of DC is, and those can all mean the same thing, but it's a different subject and a different verb for each of them.
Yeah.
So the White House announced and the president said. Does that mean the same thing? Well, in a certain sense, no, because it's different. But it's also, of course, it means the same thing.
Yeah.
So the New Testament uses different language at different times, and I don't think that necessarily disqualifies it. That's just how language works.
Yeah. Okay.
So bias test. Were these people too biased?
Yeah. Which I feel like also kind of ties in with character.
Yeah.
Like, what do they have to gain from this? They'd be biased because they're. Well,
they loved Jesus, so therefore we can't trust them. Or if I was writing an account of my wife's life, might it be the case that because I love her, I want to record it as accurately as possible? And we have instances of both. You go to a funeral, and sometimes funerals are like, oh, they always did this and they never did this, and you're like, that's not true. That's not who they were. But you also have funerals where the widow is like, yeah, he was annoying and this was obnoxious, but gosh, he was a great dad. And I think we have plenty of examples where somebody's very close to them and can still be a faithful witness.
Can still be honest. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. There's other. Basically, the idea is that can we look at the New Testament authors and think, can we discern if they're reliable witnesses? And I think people ask good questions. And yet I also think if we're sober about looking at it, the answers aren't outlandish. Oh, obviously they wrote it 30 years later and they all sound different and it's full of contradictions and they loved him so much. It was, we can't believe any of it. I think let's just slow down and look at these things.
Yeah. Can
it be that, there are legitimate and not just sort of exceptional reasons, but maybe it's actually more reasonable that this should be accepted. And maybe it's less reasonable to have some kind of out of the blue claim with nothing behind it about why we shouldn't trust it, which is more likely, the claim that this is a reliable thing or that these are unreliable. And if we look at each of those data points soberly and slowly, I think it comes out consistently that, no, this actually is reliable.
Just based on the author's authenticity?
Yeah, let's look at, were they trying to cover something up? If you were writing a biased thing, you would smooth things out. When I'm telling you about who I am as a dad, if I want you to think I'm an amazing dad, I leave out the time I yelled at my kid. But if I'm telling you, this is just who I was as a dad this weekend, you know what? My kid went to their room crying and I was embarrassed because I yelled and slammed the door. Not my best hour. As opposed to, my kids smiled the whole weekend. We had ice cream and everyone wore matching clothing. We held hands and prayed. Which one of those is more believable?
Yeah.
Probably the one where we did love each other. We did have fun, but we also had some really bad moments. And so the New Testament includes those things.
Includes the pretty and the bad.
Yeah, includes the ugly. It's like, gosh, you were a doofus. Or you're a bad. Like, Jesus called Peter Satan. If I'm Peter, I'm lobbying for that to, that's a fine first draft, but can we cut that out?
Yeah, can we not have that?
But it's in there, and I think that speaks to, it's because that's what happened.
Yeah. This is awesome. You were saying, just it's just something you could spend hours on just digging into and just ruminating in, just pondering a lot of these different points. So it's very interesting.
Shane, I have a question for you.
Yes.
How many vacuum cleaners, brands, and names can you list in 30 seconds?
From 1980?
Yeah, I bet you can get,
I think I could get 2.
So those of you playing at home, we're gonna finish with this today. Finish with vacuum cleaner types.
What a way to end.
Brand.
What a segue to end.
I saw it. It was out of the corner of my eye.
And you just had to?
All right.
Oh, no.
Do you need a timer?
Is it just for me?
Just for you.
You got to.
No. This is just you, Shane.
You're not. Oh,
I've been talking the whole hour. And go.
This is okay. Dyson vacuum cleaners.
Vacuum cleaners, brands, and
Can't
types.
remember. I used to have one.
A vacuum?
Well, no, like the big red one. That's like all I can.
Big red. Maybe that's on there.
Big red. Just keep thinking of Dyson. This is rough. Orville. I don't know.
That's popcorn.
Yeah. Well, I'll just start naming names.
Good. Kraft.
Suckers.
GE.
General Electric.
Actually, that might be on here. I don't know.
That might be. I'll write it down. Sure. Radio Shack. I don't know.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Radio Shack vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
There's one vacuum that's killing me that I just don't know. That I don't remember the name. It's been Orneal. I don't know.
Ooh.
There's one that starts with an O.
All right. We're going to call it.
I'm a goner.
You might be thinking of the 8-pound Auric XL.
Auric.
Yeah, that's not on here.
Oh, really? Yeah. It's just not even. Okay. Well,
all right. You, I think you got 0.
Dyson is a new company. Yeah, I know. It wasn't going to be
Number
on there.
1, Hoover.
Hoover. I knew that one.
Number 2, Eureka.
Nope.
Number 3, Regina. Number 4, Electrolux.
Nope.
Number 5, Sunbeam.
Nope.
Number 6, Kirby.
Okay, I've heard of that one. Yeah.
One time Charlotte let a Kirby salesman into our house. It was a disaster.
Did you get anything free out of it?
It was a disaster. I'll tell you about it. It's a longer story.
All right.
Number 7, Westinghouse. Number 8, Upright. An upright vacuum.
Just okay.
That's a type.
Okay.
Number 9, a canister vacuum. And number 10, Dust Buster.
Dust Buster. I've heard of Dust Devil, but not Dust Buster.
Okay.
That's terrible.
On that note, on the absolute defeat that was Shane's effort. We'll see you next time.
That's the end of the episode, but we want to continue the conversation. Continue the conversation by sharing this episode, subscribing, or leaving a review. Connect with us on Instagram at 2414podcast. Connect with us through email at 2414@stlukes-church.com. Or best of all, keep the conversation going by inviting someone to process with you so that you can each walk away with more understanding that leads to more conversation as the journey continues. If you happen to be in the Seattle-Tacoma area of Washington, stop by on a Sunday morning and say hi. 2414 is a podcast produced by St. Luke's Lutheran Church in Federal Way, Washington. To find more content, discover upcoming opportunities to connect in person, or to support the show, head on over to stlukes-church.com. Thanks for walking with us.